The wind had been blowing hard all morning, dry, gritty, and relentless. The kind that left dust in your teeth and stung your eyes like ash. Out on the edge of the Great Plains, miles from the nearest town, the world could feel empty, cruel, and wide enough to swallow a man whole. But for 7-year-old Lottie, the world was her family's trading post, a weather-beaten building, clinging to life along an old wagon trail that saw fewer travelers with every season. It was just her and her ma now. Her pa had been gone too. Winters, shot by bandits, or maybe just run off with another woman, town gossip varied. Her ma never said. She just rolled up her sleeves and kept the place going, skinning rabbits, patching boots, and boiling stew from whatever dried meat and root vegetable she could scavenge. Some days the only voices Lottie heard were her own and the crackle of the fire. But that afternoon, just before the sun started to dip behind the hills, a shadow staggered in across the horizon. Lottie was sitting on the porch, carving a stick with her dull pocket knife, when she saw the man. At first, he looked like a heat mirage, a blur on the shimmering trail. But as he got closer, she saw he wasn't a ghost or a traveler. He was a mess of blood, dust, and desperation. He collapsed a few feet from the porch. "Mister?" Lottie dropped her stick and hopped off the step, boots thudding in the dirt. The man rolled to his side, trying to push himself up with shaking arms. He had a thick beard, cracked lips, and a deep red stain on the left side of his shirt. His hand pressed over it, but blood still seeped between his fingers. Lottie looked back at the door. Ma was inside, probably chopping carrots or fixing that squeaky hinge on the trapdoor. The woman could do a dozen things at once, but never missed the sound of boots or danger. The stranger groaned. "You look weary." "Mister," Lottie said cautiously, "my ma makes the best stew in these parts." The man blinked up at her, trying to focus. A hint of a smile twitched at the corner of his mouth, but it didn't last. He slumped forward again. That was when May came out, rifle in hand. She wasn't one to startle easy, but the way her eyes narrowed said everything. One look at the man and she was at his side, kneeling. "Lottie, get the clean water, now." Lottie rushed to do as she was told. May rolled him onto his back, checked for weapons, then tore open his shirt. The wound was bad, looked like a bullet had passed through clean, but infection was already setting in. His skin burned with fever. There was no telling how long he'd been walking. The man muttered something, but it made no sense. His voice was hoarse, dry as tumbleweed. "Don't try to speak," Ma said sharply. "Save your strength." Lottie returned with water and clean cloths. Together, they dragged the man inside and laid him on the cot near the fireplace. Ma worked in silence, cleaning the wound, applying herbs from her own mix, stitching the skin with a practiced hand. Lottie watched quietly, biting her lip. "Is he gonna die?" she finally asked. Ma didn't look up. "Not if I can help it." Hours passed. The man slept, moaning occasionally, soaked in sweat. May refused to let Lottie stay too close. She said fever made men unpredictable. Still, the girl sat by the hearth and watched him. Something about him didn't feel like danger. He didn't have the wild look of a raider or the smooth talk of a gambler. He looked tired, real tired, like someone who'd been running a long, long way. Lottie whispered, mostly to herself, "I think he's good." Ma glanced at her. "That? So? He didn't hurt me. He didn't even look scared. He looked sad." Ma didn't answer, just kept wringing out a cloth and pressing it to his head. That night, as wind rattled the shutters and coyotes howled in the hills, the man's eyes fluttered open. He looked around the room, dazed, weak but aware. May was sitting in the corner, gun across her lap. "You're in my home," she said flatly. "You bleed on my floor, you get my help. But any tricks and I'll put you back in the dirt." The man coughed a rough, rasping sound. Not here to hurt no one, he managed. Ma studied him hard, but something softened in her face. You got a name? He hesitated, then whispered, Eli. Well, Eli, she said, standing and placing a steaming bowl on the small table beside him. You're gonna eat, rest, and answer some questions tomorrow. Until then, welcome to the middle of nowhere. And with that, she walked away. Lottie crept out from behind the chair and grinned. Told you Ma makes the best stew. Eli gave a faint, crooked smile. For the first time in weeks, Lottie felt like the world might be changing. Maybe not for worse. Maybe for better. Morning came quietly. The kind of still, golden hush that only touched the plains before the heat set in. Lottie was already awake, crouched near the stove, turning cornmeal into flat cakes like her ma had taught her. The stranger Eli had slept through the night, though his breath had come in rough patches. Now and again he murmured in his sleep. Words she couldn't understand. Names, maybe. Please. May came in from outside, hair tucked into a red bandana, rifle still slung over one shoulder. She didn't say a word at first. Just looked at Eli, still unconscious on the cot, then turned. Her sharp eyes toward Lottie. He move yet? Nope, still sleepin', Lottie said, flipping a cake. Talked a little in his dreams. Dreams can say a lot, Ma muttered, setting the rifle near the door. They ate breakfast in silence. Ma didn't speak until she was sipping her coffee, dark and strong as always. When he wakes, she said slowly, you let me do the talkin'? Understand? Lottie nodded. But he don't seem bad, Ma. That's not the point. Men don't have to seem bad to bring trouble. Lottie didn't reply. She understood her mother well enough by now. Clara Hollis had been through more than most. She'd married a good man who'd built the trading post with his bare hands, only to lose him to either bullets or betrayal. Lottie never quite knew which. After that, Ma hardened. She kept to herself, talked little, trusted less. And she kept the post going like a one-woman army, but Ma had a heart. It was just buried under CALLUSES. By mid-morning, Eli stirred. He groaned, tried to sit, and winced as pain stitched up his side. Easy, Ma said, crossing the room and handing him water. You had a bullet through the ribs. Fever nearly took you. You're lucky we found you. Eli took the cup, his hand shaking slightly. He sipped and coughed. Where am I? Our trading post, Ma said flatly. 2 days from the nearest town, assuming you could ride. Which you can't, yet. He blinked at her, taking in the rough-hewn beams overhead, the shelves of supplies, the old stove. You patched me up? I don't like strangers bleeding out on my floor. Thank you, he said, voice hoarse. Ma nodded once. You got a name? Eli. You said that last night. Got a last name? Cutter, he said after a pause. Ma's eyes flickered, but she kept her tone level. Where you headed, Eli Cutter? He hesitated. South, looking for a horse. Then work. Ma raised an eyebrow. Work that leaves you shot in the side? Eli looked away. Didn't ask for your life story, she said, but I do need to know if someone's coming after you. I have a little girl here, and I don't aim to let anyone bring blood to my doorstep. I'm not wanted, Eli said quickly, too quickly. Not for anything real, just misunderstandings. I didn't hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. Lottie peeked in from the side room, silently listening. May studied him long and hard. Finally, she stepped back. You'll stay until you can stand. Then you move on. No trouble while you're here. I won't cause any, Eli said. You already have. She muttered under her breath and walked back to the stove. For the rest of the day, Eli dozed in and out, his body healing slowly under the warm weight of wool blankets and Ma's rough remedies. Lottie brought him more stew at lunch, ignoring her mother's warnings. You look better, she said brightly. Eli smiled a little. You're the one who found me? I saw you coming. Thought you were a ghost at first. You fell over. Like a sack of flour. He chuckled, then winced. Why'd you help me? Lottie shrugged. You look sad and tired. I don't think sad, tired men are bad, just lost. He looked at her, eyes softening. You're a smart girl. She beamed. Don't let Ma hear you say that. She say I'm too nosy. She's just cautious. She's always cautious, Lottie agreed. But she's good, even if she pretends not to be. That evening, Ma sat on the porch with her rifle across her knees. The sun was sinking low, lighting the horizon in gold and fire. Eli stirred behind her, leaning against the door frame. He looked stronger already, though pale. Pretty land, he said softly. It's harsh, Ma replied. Still pretty. She didn't answer for a while. Then she said, You sure there's no one hunting you? Eli took a long breath. Not anymore. But I've learned not to sleep easy. She nodded slowly, accepting that. You'll help stack wood tomorrow if you're able. Yes, ma'am. And that was that. For now, Clara Hollis was letting a stranger stay. Not because she trusted him, but because her instincts, honed sharper than any knife, told her this man was running from something worse than the law. And sometimes, when a person's running, all they need is one place to rest. Just for a while. The prairie night could be cruel, even when the wind calmed and the stars lit up the sky like scattered silver. It was the kind of silence that pressed down on the world, filled with things unsaid. Inside the trading post, the fire crackled low, casting a soft amber glow on the worn wooden walls. Clara lay on her narrow bed in the back room, eyes open, listening. It wasn't Eli she was listening to. It was her daughter. Lottie had snuck from her bed and dragged a quilt to the cot where Eli lay resting. She wasn't supposed to, but Clara didn't stop her. Not yet. Something in the girl had softened since Eli's arrival, like hope had poked its stubborn head through the dry soil of her small world. Eli hadn't said much after dinner. He'd eaten slow, quietly thanking Lottie for the help and Ma for the stew. He still looked worn, but the color in his face was coming back. His eyes, clearer now, held shadows Clara didn't like, but they didn't carry the glint of a man who'd harm a child. She would have seen that. So she let Lottie talk. You ever have a little girl? Lottie asked in a hushed voice, sitting cross-legged beside Eli's cot. Eli blinked slowly. No, he said. Never had a family of my own. Ma says family's more important than breath, but sometimes I think breath's easier. He gave a quiet chuckle, careful not to strain his ribs. You're pretty wise for your age. Ma says I talk too much for my own good. Eli shifted, wincing slightly. Where's your pa? Lottie hesitated, then looked down at the frayed edge of her quilt. Gone. Eli didn't ask more. He was good to me, Lottie added quickly. Taught me how to catch rabbits, taught Mo how to shoot better. But one day he rode out with a man he called an old friend and never came back. Eli frowned. No. Word at all? Just a hat left on the porch 2 weeks later. Ma said everything we needed to know was under that brim. He let out a breath. She never said if he died. But she never cried, neither. She's strong, Eli said. She's angry, Lottie corrected. Strong too, but mostly angry. There was a pause. You angry too? He asked. No, Lottie said. Just lonely. From the back room, Clara closed her eyes and breathed in slow. That simple word lonely cut sharper than any knife. She'd thought she was protecting Lottie all this time, keeping her away from the rough men who passed through, from the pain of loss, from a world that only took and rarely gave. But maybe in doing so, she'd made a cage out of safety. Maybe. The girl needed more than just food and fire. She needed life. Later that night, Clara rose from her bed and stepped softly into the main room. Lottie was asleep on the floor now, quilt tangled around her legs, one hand still resting near Eli's arm. He was awake watching the dying firelight dance along the logs. "You should have sent her back to bed," Clara said quietly, taking a seat across from him. "I tried," Eli whispered. "But she needed to talk." "She always needs to talk," Clara replied, arms crossed. "Never runs out of questions. She's got a good heart. She's got no friends, no schooling. Just this place and me." Eli studied Clara. The light softened her face. The hard lines of survival still etched deep, but there was weariness there too. Not physical, but the kind born of holding too much for too long. "You could leave this place," he said. She gave a humorless laugh. "To what? A town that pities widows? A ranch job that won't hire a woman unless she cooks or cleans? I got roots here, maybe dry ones, but they run deep." He nodded. "Still, she deserves more." "I know," Clara said, voice low. "But knowing and being able to do those ain't the same." A log in the fire popped out. Eli looked at her. "I'm not who you think I am." "I haven't decided who I think you are," Clara replied. "But I know trouble when I see it, and it's sitting in my only cot." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." There was another long silence. Then Clara added, "You got a bounty?" Eli didn't answer right away. He stared at the fire like it might speak for him. "I didn't kill anyone that didn't need killing," he said finally. "Wasn't always that way, but I learned." She nodded slowly. "I figured. Why let me stay?" he asked. Clara looked toward her sleeping daughter, then back at Eli. "Because that little girl trusted you with her story. And if she can do that, I reckon I can trust you with stew and shelter. For now." He looked down, overwhelmed by a feeling. He hadn't known in years being seen. Outside, coyotes howled again, farther away this time. The wind picked up and brushed against the shutters like a whisper. And in that quiet room, 3 souls drifted toward an uneasy peace. Tomorrow might bring questions, or worse men looking for the past. But for one night, a wounded stranger, a hardened widow, and a lonely child shared something rare on the frontier, a flicker of warmth in the cold, and none of them, not even Clara, wanted to let it go too soon. By the 4th day, Eli Cutter was out of bed. Not for long, just enough to shuffle from the cot to the porch bench and sit under the rising sun with a blanket draped over his shoulders and a cup of weak coffee in his hand. His wound still pulled at his side with every breath, but he didn't complain. He simply nodded at Clara when she brought him food and tipped his hat. Lottie's idea of politeness when the little girl came bouncing out to check on him. "Don't tip that hat too hard," she giggled. "You'll tear your stitches." Eli gave a crooked smile. "I'll be careful, Doc." Lottie puffed out her chest. "I could be a doctor. I already help with the poultice." Clara, sweeping the porch behind them, grunted. "You helped spill the medicine, more like." "I measured it," Lottie insisted, hands on her hips. "Mostly." The days took on a rhythm after that. Eli insisted on helping, though Clara tried to keep him resting. He couldn't lift much at first, but he stacked kindling, cleaned the rifles, and fixed the hinge on the root cellar door, a task Clara had put off for months. It was quiet, careful work, nothing grand. But it made a difference. Clara noticed the way the tools were put back straighter, the way Lottie giggled more, the way the place didn't feel quite so heavy. She hated how much she noticed. Every evening, when the sun dipped low and shadows crept across the plains, Clara would clean the counters, refill the lantern, and try not to think about what Eli might be hiding. He hadn't told her much, only that he used to scout for the army, had a falling out with some bad law, and had been on the run since. That wasn't enough. Clara didn't trust men with short stories. The ones who had something to say, who told you every detail, they were usually the ones who didn't have much to hide. But Eli's silences? They were deep, like a canyon with no bottom. One evening, she found him chopping kindling behind the shed, his shirt damp with sweat, one hand pressed to his ribs as he worked. "You'll tear yourself open again," she said, arms folded. Eli paused, leaned on the axe handle. "I've healed worse with less." "That doesn't mean you should act like a fool." He glanced at her. "I'm not trying to prove anything." "Sure you are," Clara said. "Trying to prove you belong." He wiped his brow with his sleeve. "Do I?" Clara didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "You work hard. Lottie likes you." "That's more than I can say for most men who pass through. But you don't trust me." "No," she said honestly, "not yet." That night, Lottie asked if Eli could teach her to carve wood. "Pa said I was too little," she said. "But I ain't too little anymore." Clara hesitated. Her husband had always been overprotective, said the knife was too sharp, the wood too rough, that Lottie would have plenty of time for grown-up things later. But Eli didn't flinch. He nodded, pulled out a small, dull blade from his boot, well worn, safe enough, and handed it to her. "You start with soft pine," he said, guiding her hands gently. "And you always cut away from yourself, like this?" Clara watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart tangled in memories she thought she'd buried. Lottie's laughter, the way Eli crouched low, patient and calm, the way he never treated the girl like a nuisance. It stirred something old in Clara, something she didn't want to feel. Hope. The next morning, Ellie was up early, already feeding the chickens before Clara had lit the stove. "You don't have to do all this," she said, stepping out with her apron tied tight. "I know," he said, "but it helps. I don't sleep much anyway." Clara watched him for a long moment. "Lottie says you dream bad." He nodded. "Every night. You want to talk about it?" "No," Eli said quietly, "but thank you." She almost smiled. Almost. Later that afternoon, a rider passed on the road, first one in weeks. He didn't stop, just slowed enough to nod at Clara, tip his hat, and keep riding east. But Eli froze when he saw the man. His jaw tightened. His hand instinctively moved toward his hip, where no gun rested. Clara noticed. After the rider vanished into the hills, she walked over. "You know him?" "No, but he rode like a man who's looking. For you? Maybe." She studied. "Him. You bring that kind of heat here, I'll need to know before it burns my door." Eli looked her in the eyes. "If it comes to that, I'll ride before it touches you or your girl." Clara didn't respond. She just nodded once and walked back inside, heart beating a little faster. She didn't know if Eli Cutter was dangerous, but she was starting to believe one thing for certain. He was a man trying hard not to be, and in a world like theirs, that counted for something. The wind shifted that morning. Clara knew it before she even stepped outside. There was a change in the air, a stillness that didn't belong on the prairie. The birds were quiet, the chickens unsettled. Even Lottie, usually a bundle of motion, seemed slower as she set out the empty jars for Clara to fill with preserves. Inside, Eli sensed it too. He just finished checking the snare traps near the tree line, his ribs still sore but manageable. As he limped back toward the trading post, his head lifted sharply. Dust on the horizon. A rider. Fast. Too fast to be a trader. Too steady to be a drifter. The man rode in like he owned the road toll, lean, with a rifle slung across his back and a pistol riding low on his hip. His hat was wide-brimmed, face clean-shaven, and his coat dark brown and dust-covered clung to him like he was born in it. When he dismounted, his boots hit the dirt like thunder. Clara stepped onto the porch, rifle resting casually across her arm. Lottie poked her head out from behind her apron. "Can I help you?" Clara asked, voice calm. The man tipped his hat. "Name's Fitch. I'm just looking for someone." Eli stepped out from behind the side shed. He kept his posture relaxed. but his hand rested near the axe he'd left half buried in a stump. Fitch's eyes flicked to him, lingering just a beat too long. Didn't expect to see anyone but a widow and her girl this far out. Well, Clara said, you found more than you expected. Fitch smiled, sharp and slow. That I did. Inside, Clara poured him a mug of coffee and offered no seat. Fitch leaned against the counter, his long fingers drumming on the rim of the cup as his eyes swept the room, cataloging every door, every shelf, every face. I've been tracking someone, he said casually. Name's Eli Cutter, former scout. Went off trail after a job turned bad in Dry Creek. Marshall's son got killed. There's a bounty. How much? Clara asked without blinking. 300 alive. Dead, it's lighter. Lottie's eyes widened. She clutched the hem of Clara's skirt. Clara kept her expression flat. That's a lot of coin. He's dangerous, Fitch said. But clever. Slipped through 2 towns already. Last saw tracks heading this way. Eli stepped into the room, moving slow, eyes steady. I'm not hiding. Fitch turned to him, not surprised. That's bold. I'm not the man you think, Eli said. I was there in Dry Creek, but I didn't kill that boy. Fitch tilted his head. Then why run? Because the law out there didn't care for truth. Only blood. Clara's voice cut in sharp. You got proof of anything? Only what's left of my conscience, Eli said. Fitch laughed. That don't buy much. The room grew quiet. Lottie looked from Ma to Eli, heart thudding in her chest. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. Eli was the man they were looking for, and now that man had a price. I got no orders to kill you, Cutter, Fitch said. Just bring you back. Eli said nothing. Fitch sipped his coffee, smirked. Course, things get messy sometimes. Clara moved between them slowly, placing herself in Fitch's line of sight. Not here they don't, she said evenly. No blood gets spilled in this post. Not unless it's mine or my girl's. Fitch eyed her. You willing to shield a fugitive? Unwilling to shield a man who's kept my roof up, helped my daughter smile again, and hasn't done a lick of wrong under my watch. He's wanted by men who may not care what's true. Fitch straightened. You planning to stop me? No, Clara said. I'm planning to make you wait. Eli glanced at her, confused. Fitch raised a brow. You came a long way, Clara continued, and I don't doubt your aim, but I doubt your heart. So you'll sleep here tonight on the porch. You'll eat my stew, and you'll listen to a man's truth before you drag him back to hang. And if I say no? Fitch asked. Clara lifted her rifle and cocked it with a calm hand. Then you'll ride out with a limp. Lottie stared up at her mother with wide eyes. Eli looked away, jaw tight. Fitch studied Clara, measuring her. Then slowly he smiled. Fair enough, he said, one night. Let the man plead his case. After that, I do what I came to do. He tipped his hat again and stepped outside. That evening, the fire burned low inside the post. Eli sat across from Clara, face pale but set with resolve. Lottie sat on the floor, hugging her knees. I didn't kill the marshal's boy, Eli said. We were ambushed by raiders. I tried to save him. I failed. That's the truth. Clara didn't speak. She just listened, watching his face, hearing the tremor beneath the calm. The marshal needed someone to blame, Eli continued. So he blamed the scout. The one without a badge. The one without a family. And now? Clara asked softly. Eli looked toward the door. Now? I've got something to lose. Lottie moved beside him and took his hand. Clara stared at them both. She didn't know what would happen in the morning, but she knew one thing for certain. Eli Cutter was no killer, but the man on her porch? He might be. The night passed slowly. Fitch slept outside on the porch, bedroll spread across the planks, rifle beside him like a coiled snake. He snored lightly, one eye half open. Inside the post, no one truly rested. Clara sat at the window, watching the horizon. Lottie had been tucked into bed hours ago, though she stirred in her sleep, murmuring soft things that only mothers could understand, fear hiding in the words of dreams, and Eli. He sat by the fire, staring at the flames, awake. Clara finally moved from her chair and took the seat beside him, both of them silent for a while, just listening to the wind nudge the shutters. "You should have run," she said. Eli didn't. Look away from the fire. Thought about it more than once. "Then why stay?" He took a breath. "Because running's all I've done. And for the first time in years, I found something I didn't want to lose." Clara didn't answer. He glanced at her. "That little girl. She's light. And you carry more weight than any woman I've ever seen. You didn't owe me shelter or kindness, but you gave it. That means something. You ever give someone kindness you wish you hadn't?" Clara asked softly. He looked down. "Yeah, more than once." She nodded. "Me too." Just before dawn, the sound of boots on the floorboards pulled them both to their feet. Fitch stood at the doorway, hat in hand, coat pulled tight. "Time's up," he said flatly. Clara stepped forward, rifle in hand but not raised. "We made a deal." "I heard his story," Fitch said. "Don't change the fact there's a bounty." Eli stood, shoulders squared, jaw set. "I won't fight you." Fitch tilted his head, surprised. "No last stand? No running? No point?" Eli said. "I'm tired of running. And I won't have blood spilled in this house." Clara's hands tightened around the rifle. "But—" Eli turned to her and gave a small, grateful nod. "Thank you, Clara, for everything." Lottie came running down the stairs, barefoot, eyes wide. "You can't take him," Fitch blinked. "Stay out of this, little one." Lottie planted herself in front of Eli, arms spread like wings. "He's not a bad man." "Lottie," Clara said, stepping forward, voice sharp but pained. "No," she cried. "He helped Ma. He helped me. He didn't do nothing wrong." Fitch's face shifted just a flicker. Maybe guilt. Maybe recognition. Eli knelt, groaning from his ribs, and placed his hands gently on Lottie's shoulders. "It's okay, little Doc." She shook her head furiously. "It's not. You're the first person to treat me like I matter." Clara's chest ached at the words. Fitch sighed, looking suddenly older. "You got proof of what happened?" He asked Eli. Eli stood slowly, face grim. "There was a man with the Raiders. White man. Wore a star on his chest, used to ride with the marshal's crew. He turned on us during the escort, set the ambush." "You got a name?" Fitch asked. Eli nodded. "William Greeley." Fitch stared at him, eyes narrowing. "Greeley's name's come up before. Went missing 2 months back. Last seen near Dry Creek with a saddlebag full of stolen gold and a girl he rescued. Folks said he was aiming to make himself a legend. I saw him shoot the marshal's son," Eli said. "Right in the back. Called it justice for what happened to his brother years ago." Fitch stepped back. "Why didn't you say that from the start?" He asked, voice low. No one would believe a scout with a rough past over a badge-wearing man like Greeley, Eli replied. "Especially not in a town that already wanted blood." Clara watched Fitch carefully. She'd seen liars before, smooth, polished ones. Eli didn't look like them. Fitch rubbed his jaw, eyes on the floor. "I'm not saying I believe you," he muttered. "But I've heard enough rumors to wonder. Maybe I bring you in alive. You get a trial. Maybe Greeley's name comes up." "Maybe I hang anyway," Eli said, quiet. "That's not my call." Fitch replied. "I bring him in. I don't judge him." Clara finally spoke, her voice as cold as steel. "You sure about that?" He looked at her. "I've seen men hang for a cough in the wrong direction," she said. "You know what kind of men sit in saloons and write laws in places like Dry Creek." Fitch exhaled. You're not wrong. He looked between them again, Eli standing bruised and battered, with nothing but pride and quiet resolve. And Clara, fierce as ever. And the little girl who had thrown herself into the path of a gun for a man she barely knew. Then he did. Something surprising. He walked to the stove, poured himself a cup of Clara's coffee, and sat down. Greeley's wanted in 2 other territories, he said. If I bring you in with a story like that, and it checks out, the marshal won't. Get his scapegoat. Greeley will. You believe me? Eli asked. I believe there's enough smoke to look for the fire. Clara lowered her rifle. Fitch met her eyes. He stays here, but he's your responsibility. You ride into town, say you've got information. It better be the truth. It will be, Clara said. But I ain't letting you take him, not now, not ever. Fitch nodded once. Slowly. Then let's see if a man like Eli Cutter can clear his name before someone else dies chasing the wrong ghost. The sky turned black before noon. Thick clouds rolled in from the west, bloated with rain and rage. The wind howled low. At first, like a warning whispered through the grass, then rose to a shriek, lifting dust into the air and slamming shutters hard enough to rattle bones. The storm was coming fast, and with it, a decision that couldn't be put off much longer. Inside the trading post, Clara moved with practiced urgency, securing windows, reinforcing the back door, double-latching the cellar. Lottie helped as best she could, tying down baskets, folding linens, placing lanterns by each doorway. Eli stood at the front window, shoulders tight, watching the horizon vanish under a wall of rain. Fitch hadn't left. The bounty hunter sat on the porch, sharpening his knife like the storm didn't matter. When Clara stepped outside, he didn't look up. You should come in, she said. Fitch flicked his eyes toward the clouds. Not my first frontier squall. This one'll break bones if it don't tear the roof off first. He sheathed his knife, finally standing. You let a fugitive sleep under your roof. I don't think the storm is the worst idea you've had. Clara's jaw tensed. He's not a fugitive anymore. That's not up to you. It is, she said. Right now it is. They locked eyes. The air crackled, not just from the brewing storm, but from the weight of everything unspoken. You're a bounty hunter, she added, not a judge. And you've seen enough to know the law ain't clean. I don't. Get paid to clean it, he muttered double quotes. No, you get paid to drag men back in chains. But maybe, just maybe you don't have to finish this one the way they told you to. Fitch looked past her, toward Eli, now helping Lottie close the front. Shudders. How long you known him? 6 days. And you trust him? I've known good men for years who never once made me feel safe. Eli Cutter made my girl laugh. That's worth something. Fitch didn't argue. The storm hit like a hammer. Rain slammed against the roof. Wind screamed through the gaps in the boards, and thunder cracked so loud it shook the shelves. For a long time, the 3 adults and 1 child sat together in the center room, oil lamps glowing, trying to ignore the roar outside. But storms have a way of making truths rise. Fitch finally spoke. You still planning to ride into town with me? He asked Clara. She nodded. If Greeley's name is the key to clearing Eli's, I'll stand in front of any marshal and say what I've heard. You're risking a lot. Clara gave a bitter laugh. This whole place is a risk. Breathing out, here's a gamble. Eli leaned forward. Fitch, I know what I am. I've got blood on my hands. I've done things. But the boy in Dry Creek wasn't one of them. I didn't kill him. I tried to stop it. And if you had? Fitch asked. I'd still be here, Eli said, owning it, but I didn't. Fitch stared at him for a long time. The firelight made his face look older, tired. Then he turned. To Clara. You really going to vouch for him in front of men with rifles? I've stood in front of worse with less reason, she said. And your daughter? Fitch asked quietly. Clara hesitated. Her eyes found Lottie, who had curled up in the corner on a bedroll, snoring softly despite the storm. She deserves a world where truth matters, Clara said. If I don't fight for that now, then what's the point of any of this? Fitch looked away. I can get you an escort to town. Quiet. I know a couple marshals who aren't drunk on their own badge. Mike, listen. Eli raised his eyebrows. Why help me? Fitch didn't answer at first. Then quietly, because once I didn't listen. A long time ago, cost a good man his life. I don't make that mistake twice. The wind howled harder, shaking the rafters. Suddenly, a loud crack tore through the building as one of the rear shutters snapped loose, slamming against the wall. Rain surged in like a flood. Clara and Eli rushed to it, pushing the shutter closed, nailing it down. Everyone moved as one, no talk of bounty, guilt, or justice, just hands trying to hold the post together. By the time they finished, the storm had passed. The sky cracked open, the rain stopped, and silence fell like a shroud. In the calm that followed, they sat again, exhausted, wet, changed. Fitch stood first. I'll ride at first light. Get word to a man I know near Redstone. Will meet you halfway if he agrees to hear you out. Clara nodded. Eli looked down. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Fitch said. You still gotta stand trial in the eyes of the law. But maybe now you won't be the only one speaking. Then he walked to the porch and spread his bedroll again. This time, Clara didn't make him sleep outside. Inside, Eli sat beside Lottie, brushing wet hair from her face as she slept. She doesn't know how close it came, he whispered. She will, Clara said, settling beside him. Someday. He looked at her. You didn't have to fight for me. You could have let him take me. I didn't do it for you, she said. I did it because I've seen too many good men lost to bad justice. You're the first one I had a reason to fight for in years. They didn't touch, didn't speak more, but something passed between them. Not romance. Not yet, but the beginning of something worth protecting. 2 days later, Clara Hollis rode into Redstone with Eli by her side and Lottie riding behind her on the saddle, arms wrapped tight around her waist. The trip had been silent, long, and tense. Fitch had kept his word, arranging for them to meet a lawman he trusted just outside town, a marshal named Silas Dunn, a man with more gray in his beard than in his hair, and more truth in his eyes than Clara was used to seeing in men who carried a badge. They had met him at sunrise in a grove of cottonwoods. Silas had looked Eli up and down, read Clara's prepared statement, and listened to Lottie as she insisted that Eli was the nicest outlaw she ever met. That had made him chuckle, but only briefly. Then he had gotten serious. If what you're saying is true, Greeley's not just a traitor, he'd said. He's a murderer, and worse, he's hiding behind the law. That's poison, Clara nodded. And that poison nearly killed this man. Silas had agreed to bring them in under protection. No chains, no parade through the streets. Just quiet truth in a noisy world. Redstone wasn't like Clara remembered. It had grown since she last passed through years ago. More brick buildings. More people, more noise. But under it all, it still stank of greed. The saloons buzzed with drunkards by noon, and men in pressed coats and polished spurs watched everything like hawks circling a dying rabbit. As they rode in, townsfolk turned to look. They didn't know Eli, but they sensed something. A man on horseback with a scar on his cheek and eyes like a hunted wolf wasn't just another traveler. He was someone. Clara rode taller. Lottie clutched her tighter. Silas led them to the courthouse on the edge of town. Fitch was already waiting there, leaning against the rail, hat low. You weren't followed, he said as they dismounted. Wouldn't matter if we were, Clara replied. We're not hiding. Fitch gave a short nod. You sure about this? Eli stepped down from his horse, stiff but steady. I won't run again. Silas led them inside. The room was warm, dry, and lit by windows framed in thick green shutters. No jury, no judge. Just Silas, Clara, Eli, and a clerk with a shaky hand and a ledger too heavy for his thin arms. It wasn't a trial. Not yet, but it was a start. Eli told the whole story slow, steady, no embellishments. From the day he was hired, to escort the marshal's son through a disputed territory, to the ambush near Juniper Pass, to the gunshot that ended the boy's life. He spoke of Greeley's betrayal, of how the man had always been trouble, and how the marshal, blinded by grief, had refused to believe Eli over one of his own. Clara backed him up. So did Fitch, who shared rumors he'd heard across 2 counties. Of Greeley's dealings, bribes, and disappearances. One story mentioned a girl rescued from a bad man who never made it home again. Another told of gold that went missing from a federal delivery. Greeley's name was always on someone's lips, always just behind the smoke. Silas listened. Then he sat back and said, "It's enough to call for an inquiry. I'll put word out. Greeley won't be able to hide behind his badge anymore." Eli let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. "Will that clear me?" he asked. "Not yet," Silas said. "But it means you get to tell your story in the open, and that's more than most men like you get." Clara placed a hand gently on Eli's shoulder. "It's a beginning." They spent the night in Redstone under protection. Silas arranged a room at the boarding house on the edge of town. One for Clara and Lottie, another for Eli. Clara didn't sleep much. She sat by the window, watching shadows move through the lamplight, wondering how many were ghosts and how many were men who'd come looking for blood. Lottie, on the other hand, was snoring in minutes tired from the road. Safe in her mother's arms. Across the hall, Eli sat on the edge of his bed, boots still on, pistol beside him. He wasn't thinking about the trial. He was thinking about Clara. Her fire, her steadiness, the way she'd stood between him and a bounty hunter with her rifle raised and eyes full of fury. No one had done that for him before, not since he was a boy. And now? He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew one thing. If the law gave him a chance to clear his name, he wasn't going to waste it, because maybe, just maybe, there was a future waiting for him, and maybe Clara Hollis was part of it. 3 days later, the inquiry began. Marshal Silas Dunn had pulled every string he could. He'd summoned witnesses, dusted off old records, and most importantly sent word to one man who had been hiding too, long behind the wrong kind of law, William Greeley. The letter had been polite, official, a request, not a warning, but everyone in that town knew what it meant. Come explain yourself, or we'll come find you. Greeley didn't ride in like a fugitive. He came on a black gelding, wearing a freshly cleaned vest, polished boots, and that same glint in his eye Clara had seen on too many men before, men who believed they were untouchable. Eli watched from the courthouse steps as the man dismounted. "That's him," he said softly. Voice like gravel. Clara stood beside him, calm but cold. "He doesn't look like a killer." "Neither do I," Eli replied. Lottie stayed behind in the boarding house with Miss Willa, the kind old owner who'd been happy to distract her with lemon cookies and braiding. Lessons. Clara had insisted. "I don't want her hearing what that man has to say," she told Eli. "Some truths are still too sharp for little hearts." The inquiry wasn't a public affair, not yet, but word had spread like prairie fire. The courthouse was half full by mid-morning, with townsfolk, ranchers, and lawmen pressed into corners, pretending not to eavesdrop. Silas opened the proceedings with the kind of voice that demanded attention. "This is not a trial," he said, "but we're here today to determine whether one might be necessary." Then he looked to Eli. Eli told his story again, with more detail this time. He spoke of the ambush, of the terrain, the fallen boy, and the gunshot that hadn't come from a raider but from behind them. He explained how Greeley had vanished in the chaos, then reappeared later with a story that placed the blame squarely on Eli's shoulders. When he was done, Silas called Clara to speak. She stood with her chin high, her voice calm but iron-edged. Gave that man shelter because he was bleeding and broken. He helped me rebuild my post. He protected my daughter. And when the time came, he chose to stay and face the fire instead of fleeing into the night. That's not what guilty men do. There were murmurs in the room, then silence as Greeley was called forward. He smiled as he approached the stand, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Afternoon, Marshal folks." Silas didn't smile back. "State your name for the record." "William Greeley," he said. "And your current occupation?" "Deputized lawman, independent scout. Occasionally help track down missing persons." Eli stiffened at that. Clara's fists clenched. "Is it true," Silas asked, "that you were present during the escort mission to Dry Creek that ended in Marshal Reddick's son's death?" Greeley's face darkened a shade. "I was. It was a tragedy." "And you claimed Eli Cutter was responsible?" "He fled the scene." "When?" "I found the boy. He was already gone." Silas leaned forward. "Did you see Eli shoot him?" "No, but it was his gun, his post. And he disappeared right after." Clara stood. Permission to speak. Silas nodded. She turned to Greeley. "If you didn't see him shoot the boy, how do you know it was him?" Greeley gave a lazy shrug. "I know what I saw and what I didn't. He was always a bit unstable. Everyone knew it." Fitch rose from the back row. "That's a lie." Silas looked to him. "Fitch?" Fitch stepped forward, badge still hanging loose on his chest. "I've worked both sides of the law for years. I've heard Greeley's name whispered in more saloons and cells than I can count. He's lied, stolen, and worse, and no one's had the guts to bring him in. Until now." Greeley's smile faded. "You got no proof?" Silas nodded to the clerk, who opened a folder. "We found Greeley's name on a wanted list out of Nevada Territory fraud, disappearance of a minor, and theft of Army gold. There's a signed statement from a survivor of that ambush near Juniper Pass who claims Greeley gave the raiders intel on when to strike." The room froze. Eli stared. Clara's breath caught. Greeley's hand inched toward his belt. Silas barked. "Don't." Two deputies were already moving. One disarmed Greeley. The other shackled him before the man could blink. Greeley didn't fight. He just looked at Eli and hissed, "You think this clears you? They'll still see what they want to see." Eli looked down at the floor. "Maybe, but at least the truth's in the open now." Outside the courthouse, as the sun dipped behind the Redstone rooftops, Eli stood on the edge of the street with Clara and Fitch beside him. "You're a free man now," Fitch said. "At least you will be once Silas files those papers." "You planning to stay?" Eli looked at Clara, then to the road. "I don't know yet," he said. "Part of me still feels like I'm running. Even when I'm standing still." Clara touched his arm. "Then maybe it's time to stop." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Could I stop with you?" She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away. They left Redstone at dawn. The morning was cool, the sky a pale sweep of pink and gold. Clara rode with Lottie in front of her, the child's hands gripping the saddle horn, hair blowing loose and wild in the wind. Eli rode beside them, quiet, watching the land unfold like something he hadn't seen in years. Like it was his again. Behind them, the town shrank into the dust. Greeley was locked away, awaiting trial not just for the marshal's son, but for a string of crimes that had finally come into the light. Silas promised to see it through. And for once, Eli believed the law might actually do what it claimed to, But Eli wasn't thinking about trials. He was thinking about a porch that faced west, a woman who didn't flinch under pressure, and a little girl who offered him stew before. She knew his name. The trading post stood just as they'd left it, weathered, strong, stubborn. Much like its owner Dot as they approached, Lottie squealed with delight. "Ma, the chickens are still here." "Chickens usually are," Clara smiled, dismounting. Eli stayed quiet. He walked the perimeter of the post slowly, almost like he needed to reintroduce himself to the place. The lean-to was still standing. The axe was still in the stump. The cot he'd bled on had been folded up and set aside. "Feels different," he said, resting a hand on the doorframe. Clara stepped beside him. "Because you're not a stranger anymore." Eli looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "You sure? About this? Me? Staying? I've lived with worse," she teased gently. Then, more seriously, "and I've never trusted someone so fast in my life. That's not nothing. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not." He took a deep breath. "I want to earn my keep. I can expand the chicken pen, reinforce the roof, maybe even fix the broken wheel on the wagon." Clara smiled, small but real. "Then I'll let you." That night, they sat outside under the stars. Lottie curled up in a blanket on Eli's knee, dozing with her cheek against his chest. The fire crackled low between them. "I never thought I'd find peace," Eli said. "Not after what happened. You didn't find it," Clara replied. "You fought for it," he nodded slowly. "You think folks'll forget what I was?" "No," she said, "but that's not your job. Your job is to show them who you are now, and if they can't see it, well, that's their burden." He watched her for a long time. "You ever think you'd let another man into your life?" Clara looked out at the stars. "After my husband vanished, I told myself I'd raise Lottie alone, that I didn't need anyone else, and maybe I didn't." She turned to face him. "But needing and wanting, those are different things." Eli's voice was low. "And now?" "I want you here," she said simply. "Not because I'm lonely, not because you saved us, but because, somehow, you fit. Like you were always meant to be part of this place, part of us." He couldn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, he said, "You ever think about what comes next?" Clara chuckled. "Next? Tomorrow the roof leaks again, the chickens escape, and Lottie asks why the sky's blue 10 different ways." "That's a good next," he said. "I think so, too." Weeks passed. Eli rebuilt the barn wall, then the wagon wheel, then added a new fence post that gave Lottie a perfect perch for reading. He hunted just enough, traded just enough, and slowly began stitching himself into the fabric of their lives. The wounds he carried, physical and otherwise, didn't vanish. But they softened, with time, with kindness, with belonging. Clara grew used to his footsteps, his quiet advice, his steady presence. Lottie stopped calling him Mr. Eli. One morning, she ran up to him while he was feeding the goats and said, "I told the school teacher you were my pa now. That okay?" He choked on his breath. Eyes suddenly full. Clara had watched from the window. She didn't say a word, just smiled. And so life went on. The prairie didn't stop being wild. Storm still came. The road still brought strangers. Danger was never more than a season away. But in that small trading post near the edge of everything, 3 people made a home together. Not out of blood, but out of choice. And that choice every day, every sunrise was enough.